My husband and his friends tricked me, abandoned me in a dingy motel in Morocco, emptied our accounts and maxed out my cards. Survive this, genius. They mocked. I didn't just survive, I vanished. 6 months later they spotted me in Dubai thriving. Their 121 calls went unanswered. The screen on my laptop blurred as I blinked away exhaustion. Survive this, genius. The mocking note played in my mind again as I stared at my phone. 121 missed calls from the man who'd left me with nothing. 6 months ago my husband and his friends had abandoned me in Morocco. Today I'm thriving in Dubai while their financial empire crumbles. But let me start at the beginning where it all unraveled with a single spreadsheet. If you're drawn to stories of betrayal and transformation, hit subscribe. It's free and helps our community grow. Now let's continue to see how I turned abandonment into my greatest comeback. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday when I noticed it, a pattern in the numbers that shouldn't exist. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but I'd stayed to finish reviewing client portfolios that Blake's investment group managed. As a financial analyst at Meridian Partners, attention to detail was my specialty. The discrepancy was subtle. Transaction fees consistently 0.3% higher than our disclosed rates, with the difference flowing to an administrative account I couldn't trace. The blue light of my monitor cast shadows across my desk as I pulled up more accounts. The same pattern appeared in dozens of high-value portfolios, all managed by my husband Blake's team. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a clerical error. It was systematic. I cross-referenced the client list. Grant and Mason, Blake's partners, had signed off on every account showing irregularities. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silent office. Telling myself it must be an accounting quirk would be easier. Blake and I had built a life together over 7 years. The renovated Craftsman in Brookfield, weekend hiking trips, plans for starting a family next year. How could I reconcile that life with what these numbers suggested? Working late again, Mrs. Carter? The night security guard's voice startled me. I quickly minimized the screen. Just wrapping up, Tom. After he passed, I copied the files to a secure folder and shut down my computer. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and questions. Our marriage had been strained lately. Blake's late nights, defensive responses to simple questions, his sudden interest in offshore investments. I'd attributed it to work stress, but now I wondered if I'd been willfully blind. The house was dark when I arrived. Blake's note on the counter said he was at dinner with clients. I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of wine, trying to quiet my mind. But the numbers wouldn't stop dancing behind my eyelids. I pulled out my personal laptop and reviewed my copies of the files. The more I dug, the worse it looked. This wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Dawn broke through our bedroom curtains when Blake finally came home, smelling of expensive scotch. He slid into bed without noticing I was awake, and I feigned sleep, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. For 3 days I gathered more evidence, staying late at the office and tracking the money trail. It led to shell companies in the Caymans, registered to anonymous owners. But I recognized patterns in the establishment dates that aligned with fishing trips Blake had taken with Grant, Mason, and their circle of friends. My hands shook as I compiled the documents. These weren't just my husband's business associates. They were our dinner companions, our vacation partners, the people whose children would have grown up alongside ours. By Friday I couldn't bear the weight of knowledge alone. I made Blake's favorite dinner, herb-crusted salmon with roasted asparagus, and opened a bottle of the Cabernet we'd brought back from Napa on our 5th anniversary. The domesticity of the scene felt like a farce as I set the table, placing my tablet with the evidence face down beside my plate. "Something special tonight?" Blake asked, loosening his tie as he came through the door. "Just us." I forced a smile. "I thought we could talk." His expression flickered with something. Concern? Suspicion? He kissed my cheek and poured himself a generous glass of wine. Halfway through dinner, when the bottle was nearly empty and Blake had relaxed into casual conversation about office politics, I reached for my tablet. "I found something at work I need to ask you about." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Blake's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Oh." I turned the tablet toward him, showing a spreadsheet highlighting the fee discrepancies. "These accounts, all managed by your team, show a pattern of overcharging clients. The extra fees are being diverted somewhere off the books." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched emotions cross his face. Surprise, calculation, then a practiced concern. Brianna, this looks concerning, but there's an explanation. He set down his fork deliberately. We're piloting a premium service package for these clients. Additional research, more frequent portfolio adjustments. The paperwork must not have been properly updated in the main system. For 2 years. Kept my voice level. And why route the fees through 3 separate holding companies before they reach that administrative account? A flash of anger crossed his face before smoothing into a reassuring smile. He reached across the table for my hand. Accounting vagaries. You know how acquisition integrations go. Systems don't talk to each other properly. I've been working with compliance to clean it up. His explanation was plausible enough to create doubt, delivered with the sincere gaze that had made me fall in love with him. I wanted desperately to believe him. I can show you the documentation tomorrow, he continued. It's all above board, just messy. I wish you'd come to me first instead of conducting your own investigation. A hint of hurt crept into his voice. I needed to understand what I was seeing, I said, pulling my hand away. Trust, Brianna. Marriage requires trust. He stood carrying his plate to the sink. Look, I know things have been strained between us lately. I've been working too much, bringing stress home. He returned to the table, kneeling beside my chair. This misunderstanding, maybe it's a wake-up call. We need time away, just us. What are you suggesting? I asked, still uncertain whether I'd overreacted or he was manipulating me. Remember how we always talked about Morocco? The riads in Marrakesh, the blue city? His eyes lit up with what seemed like genuine excitement. Let's go for our anniversary next month. 2 weeks away from spreadsheets and office politics. The sudden pivot left me disoriented. Blake, if there's really an issue with these accounts. There isn't. He squeezed my hand. But I'll bring it up with compliance Monday, get you the documentation you need. You'll see it's nothing. And meanwhile we can plan something special, reconnect. He kissed me then and I felt myself wavering. 7 years of love and trust battled against columns of suspicious numbers. What if we invited the others? Make it a group trip, he suggested. Grant and Gabrielle, Mason and Ellie, they've all been talking about needing a getaway too. That detail, including the very people implicated in my discovery, should have been my warning. Instead, I saw it as transparency, proof of innocence. If they had something to hide, why suggest bringing everyone together? Let me think about it, I said, still cautious. Blake smiled, victorious. I'll start looking at options. We deserve this, Brie. A fresh start. As he cleared the table, humming to himself, I stared at my tablet screen. The numbers still didn't lie, but Blake's explanation had created just enough doubt for me to hesitate. I closed the spreadsheet and promised myself I'd wait for his documentation before taking my concerns further. That night, as Blake slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake wondering if I'd just been offered an anniversary gift or a carefully constructed trap. Either way, I'd just taken the first step down a path that would end with me alone in a dingy Moroccan motel, betrayed by everyone I trusted. Our descent into Menara Airport brought a flutter of anxiety I couldn't suppress. Against my better judgment, I'd agreed to this trip, partly from curiosity about what Blake was hiding, partly from hope that I was wrong. The documentation he'd promised never materialized. Just excuses about IT delays and reassurances that everything would be cleared up after our vacation. The Moroccan heat hit us like a wall as we exited the air-conditioned terminal. Blake's college friend Jordan flagged down 2 taxis, organizing our group with unusual efficiency. I noticed how they'd arranged the seating. Couples split between vehicles, with Gabrielle sliding next to me while Blake rode with her husband Grant. Isn't this exciting? Gabrielle squeezed my arm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I've been dying to see Marrakesh for years. During the drive, I studied her profile as she pointed out landmarks. Gabrielle had been my closest friend in our circle, yet something in her demeanor felt performative. When had that started? Or had I simply failed to notice until now? Our riad in the Medina exceeded the photos Blake had shown me. A hidden gem behind an unassuming door that opened into a courtyard with intricate blue tile work, citrus trees, and a bubbling fountain. The manager greeted us with mint tea while porters whisked our luggage upstairs. Yet even in this postcard-perfect setting, I caught furtive glances between Mason and Blake, a silent language I wasn't meant to understand. 7 whole days of paradise, Ellie sighed, stretching languorously on a poolside lounger. No emails, no clients, no problems. No problems. If only she knew the weight of suspicion crushing my chest. That first day established a pattern. Group excursions through the souks where I was never left alone. Vanessa suddenly becoming my shopping companion, linking arms as we navigated narrow alleys of spice vendors and carpet sellers. Blake photographing everything with excessive enthusiasm, insisting on couple shots where he held me just a little too tightly. During our second evening's dinner at a restaurant in Gellies, I excused myself to the restroom and deliberately took a wrong turn, finding a quiet alcove to test a theory. Within 3 minutes, Ellie accidentally found me. There you are. Her laugh trilled with false relief. I thought you'd been kidnapped by carpet merchants. They were watching me. All of them. Back at the Riad that night, I feigned sleep until Blake's breathing deepened. Then I checked his phone only to discover a new password. My unease deepened into dread. The following day brought a guided tour of Bahia Palace. As our group wandered through ornate rooms, I deliberately lagged behind to overhear Grant and Mason's hushed conversation. Still needs the final transfer, Grant murmured. Blake said it's handled, Mason replied. Tomorrow night's the window. She suspects something. Doesn't matter now. Everything's. Mason abruptly stopped as he noticed me approaching. These ceilings are incredible, I commented innocently, pointing upward while my heart hammered. That afternoon, fate granted me 15 unobserved minutes. While Blake showered, his laptop chimed with an incoming email. The bathroom fan masked the sound of my footsteps as I crossed to his desk. The screen showed a message from someone named Kareem. Transfer complete to designated accounts. Key will be delivered tomorrow as arranged. Accommodations prepared per instruction. A second email from Grant contained a spreadsheet attachment. My fingers flew across the keyboard, forwarding both messages to my personal email before clearing the sent folder. I barely had time to close the laptop before the shower stopped. That night, sleep eluded me. While Blake's chest rose and fell beside me, I connected invisible dots. Their conversations about transfers. The way they monitored my movements. Blake's insistence that I pack my financial documents for safekeeping before we left. Documents now locked in our hotel safe with my passport. By the 4th day I'd mapped their patterns. Blake and Grant disappeared for exactly 47 minutes every afternoon. Mason managed the group's schedule with suspicious precision. Gabrielle watched me constantly while Ellie orchestrated activities that kept me occupied. Vanessa, who normally couldn't stand Jordan, suddenly paired with him whenever I needed chaperoning. They were collaborators in something and I was the target. I needed proof beyond fragments of overhead conversations. During our excursion to Jardin Majorelle, Blake's attention was briefly captured by a tour guide. I seized the moment to check his other pocket, where I'd seen him tuck a folded paper that morning. It was a receipt, not from any tourist site, but for a property rental in a neighborhood called Sidi Ghanem, dated for the following day. The address matched nothing in our itinerary. That evening, our group gathered at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Medina. Sunset painted the city gold as servers brought platters of tagine and couscous. The atmosphere shifted subtly. More champagne appeared, toasts multiplied, and everyone seemed intensely focused on me. Another glass? Gabrielle offered, already pouring before I could answer. You've barely touched your food, Blake observed, sliding my plate closer. Try the lamb, it's incredible. Each time I set down my champagne, someone refilled it. Every conversation directed back to me. Questions about whether I was enjoying myself, if I felt relaxed, if I was tired. Jordan proposed a drinking game involving Moroccan trivia. Somehow the rules ensured I drank regardless of correct or incorrect answers. I discreetly emptied glasses into potted plants when attention shifted, pretending to grow increasingly intoxicated. I think I need air, I slurred, deliberately stumbling as Blake steadied me. Maybe we should get you back, he suggested, concern painting his features. Through heavy-lidded eyes, I caught his nod to Mason. Our return to the Riad became a performance. Me playing the part of inebriated wife, Blake the attentive husband. In our room, I swayed dramatically as he removed my jewelry, helping me into nightclothes with practiced tenderness. Just sleep, he murmured, kissing my forehead. Everything will be better tomorrow. I maintained the charade long after he believed me unconscious, listening as he made hushed phone calls. Around 1:30 a.m. he slipped from the room carrying a small bag. I waited 10 minutes before checking. My passport and cards were gone from the safe. Only my phone remained. Despite my plan to stay vigilant, exhaustion claimed me sometime before dawn. When consciousness returned, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, I knew immediately something was wrong. The air smelled of stale cigarettes instead of jasmine. The sheets were rough against my skin. The ceiling above showed water stains instead of carved cedar. Panic propelled me upright. This wasn't our Riyadh. The room was small, grimy, with peeling paint and a flickering bulb. Through dirt-streaked windows I saw a dusty street lined with run-down buildings. Nothing like the vibrant Medina. On a wobbly nightstand sat my phone, battery dead, beside my emptied wallet and a handwritten note. "Survive this, genius. Maybe next time you'll mind your own business." Reality crashed over me in waves. They had drugged me despite my precautions, transported me to what must be the seedy Ghanem address and vanished. The people I trusted most had orchestrated my abandonment in a foreign country, leaving me with nothing. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just that they'd left me, it was that they'd planned it all along. I slid to the floor, back against the wall, struggling to breathe through the tightness in my chest. The note trembled in my hands. "Survive this, genius. Maybe next time you'll mind your own business." Blake's handwriting. My husband of 7 years had left me to drown in a foreign country. After the initial wave of shock ebbed, I forced myself to think methodically. First, assess what I had. I plugged in my phone. They'd left the charger at least. While waiting for it to power up, I searched every inch of the room and my clothing. My travel journal remained in my purse, with $43 hidden in its spine. An old habit from my backpacking days that Blake had always teased me about. "Paranoid much?" he'd say. Not paranoid enough, apparently. When my phone finally lit up, notifications flooded the screen. Banking alerts. Dozens of them. With each swipe, the picture clarified. Blake had drained our joint accounts, maxed out my credit cards with cash advances, and even liquidated my personal investment account using the emergency authorization I'd foolishly granted him years ago. My hands shook as I tried logging into my bank accounts, only to find access blocked. Calls to the bank's emergency line confirmed my worst fears. Someone had reported my cards stolen yesterday and changed all my security information. The customer service representative was sympathetic but helpless. "We can send new cards to your home address, but it will take 7 to 10 business days, she explained. "I'm in Morocco," I said, my voice hollow. "And I don't have access to any funds." "I'm so sorry, ma'am. You'll need to visit the American consulate for emergency assistance." The consulate? Of course. I searched for its location, a 40-minute walk in the morning heat. With no other options, I splashed water on my face, straightened my clothes, and stepped out into an unfamiliar Marrakesh neighborhood. The streets here bore no resemblance to the picturesque Medina we'd been staying in. Buildings crumbled at the edges, laundry lines stretched between windows, and suspicious glances followed my obviously foreign presence. I clutched my nearly empty purse closer, following directions on my rapidly draining phone. 3 hours later, I emerged from the consulate with a bitter taste in my mouth. Yes, they could help with emergency repatriation, but the process would take days. They'd issued temporary identification and made calls verifying my situation, but their resources were limited. The consular officer had been kind but direct. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Carter, being abandoned by your husband isn't technically a crime requiring evacuation," he'd explained. "And while your situation is distressing, you're not in immediate danger." I'd left with pamphlets on local resources, a list of budget accommodations, and instructions to return in 2 days. With $43 to last until then, I needed to be strategic. First priority: secure affordable lodging. Second, food. Third, figure out how to survive long enough to get home and deal with Blake legally. The cheapest hostel on the consulate's list still cost more than I could afford for multiple nights. As I wandered the streets considering options, the aroma of freshly baked bread drew me toward a small cafe tucked between a spice shop and a cell phone repair stall. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since the previous night's dinner. Inside, a middle-aged man argued with a younger woman over an open ledger, gesturing frantically at columns of numbers. My attention caught on the disorganized accounting book. Figures misaligned, additions clearly incorrect, expenses categorized haphazardly. 7 years of financial analysis made the errors obvious. The man switched to broken English, noticing me hovering near the doorway. Welcome, welcome. Please sit. Food is coming. I'm sorry, I was just looking, I said, turning to leave. No. American? English? Please, coffee on house. You look tired. Too exhausted to refuse hospitality, I sank into a chair. The coffee arrived strong and sweet, accompanied by a small plate of almond cookies. The owner introduced himself as Hamid, his smile genuine beneath a salt and pepper mustache. Vacation in Marrakesh? He asked. Something in his grandfatherly concern broke through my carefully maintained composure. Before I could stop myself, tears filled my eyes. His expression shifted from cheerful to concerned, and he motioned for his daughter to take over the counter before sitting across from me. Bad things happen sometimes to good people, he said simply. Tell Hamid. The story spilled out. An abbreviated version without the financial crimes, just that my husband and friends had abandoned me with no money. As I spoke, Hamid's face darkened with indignation. This is not Morocco, he proclaimed when I finished. We do not treat guests this way. He refilled my coffee and brought more food, waving away my protests about inability to pay. When his daughter returned to their accounting argument, I found myself speaking up. Your column additions are incorrect, I said, pointing to the ledger. And you're categorizing food and supply expenses together. Both looked at me in surprise. Hamid raised his eyebrows. You know numbers? I'm a financial analyst, I explained. It's my job. He pushed the ledger toward me with hopeful eyes. Can you fix? My Aisha tries, but numbers make her crazy. My eyes too old now. For the next hour, I reorganized their books, creating proper expense categories and correcting months of calculation errors. The work calmed me, providing a sense of control I desperately needed. When I finished, Hamid studied the neatly organized columns with amazement. You are sent by Allah, he declared. 3 months I tried to make sense of this for tax filing. As I prepared to leave, having used up my welcome, Hamid blocked the door. Where you go? I need to find affordable lodging, I admitted. A rapid conversation in Arabic followed between father and daughter. Aisha looked reluctant but eventually nodded. We have storage room upstairs, Hamid said. Small but clean. You stay, help with books, I give food and room until you go home. Fair trade, yes. I stared at him, searching for ulterior motives and finding none. Why would you help me? 20 years ago I visit Chicago. Wallet stolen first day. American family helped me, give me place to stay 3 days. Now I help you. This is humanity. That night, I slept on a narrow cot in a room filled with coffee beans and spices, more grateful than I'd ever been for a stranger's kindness. When morning came, I created a structured plan in my journal. 1. Work at cafe, maintain stable environment. 2. Document everything Blake did, dates, amounts, communications. 3. Contact lawyers in US when finances allow. 4. Rebuild professional connections remotely. 5. Escape Morocco without alerting Blake. Each day followed a similar pattern. I helped serve customers during busy periods, reorganized Hamid's financial systems during lulls, and gradually expanded into helping neighboring businesses with their books. Words spread about the American financial expert, and small payments in dirhams accumulated in the lockbox Hamid gave me. At night, I meticulously documented Blake's betrayal. Screenshots of drained accounts, timelines of events, copies of the police report I'd filed locally. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was reconstructing my sense of self, piece by shattered piece. 2 weeks after waking in that dingy motel room, I sat on my cot reviewing my progress. I'd saved enough for a ticket home, established a small client base, and created a comprehensive record of Blake's financial crimes. I could return to the States now and begin legal proceedings. But as I stared at the plane ticket website on my phone, a different possibility crystallized. Going home meant playing by their rules, fighting Blake's connections and resources on his turf, possibly for years. There was another option. One that utilized my skills and the network I was building here. Instead of merely surviving, I could reinvent myself completely. Blake thought he'd broken me, left me helpless and defeated. He'd never expect me to rise from these ashes stronger than before. I closed the ticket website. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff into open air, terrifying and exhilarating at once. I wouldn't just survive this betrayal. I would transform it into the foundation of something new. Something that would eventually lead me not home to face Blake, but forward into a future he couldn't touch. That night I couldn't sleep. The decision not to return immediately to the States left me both terrified and strangely liberated. By morning I had sketched out a plan in my journal, not just for survival but for transformation. My first step was expanding beyond Hamid's cafe. With his blessing, I approached neighboring businesses with a simple pitch. I could organize their finances, optimize their cash flow, and potentially increase their profits with my expertise. My first client was Hassan, a leather goods merchant whose shop sat across from the cafe. His record-keeping system consisted of shoeboxes stuffed with receipts and handwritten notes. "My son says I need computer," Hassan complained as I sorted through years of disorganized papers at his counter. "But computer does not understand business like human." "Neither does the tax collector," I replied, holding up several overdue notices. "But I do." After 3 intensive days, I presented Hassan with organized records, a streamlined inventory system, and a startling discovery. One of his employees had been skimming profits for months through fabricated supply purchases. His gratitude manifested as generous payment and effusive recommendations throughout the market. By week 4 in Morocco, I had 6 regular clients and a growing reputation. Shop owners greeted me by name as I moved through the once unfamiliar streets that had become my workspace. My Arabic vocabulary expanded beyond pleasantries to include financial terms. The girl who had arrived broken and betrayed was transforming into someone new, someone stronger. Each night, I deposited my earnings into Hamid's ancient safe, watching my escape fund grow. But escape to where? Not back to the life Blake had destroyed. I needed a fresh start beyond his reach, somewhere I could leverage my skills without the shadow of his betrayal following me. In my 6th week, inspiration struck while helping Aisha set up an online presence for the cafe. What if I established myself digitally, offering remote consulting to clients outside Morocco? I could build a new professional identity unconnected to my past. That evening, I created a new email address using my middle name, Lynn, and set up professional profiles on financial consulting platforms. My bio was carefully crafted, technically honest about my experience and skills, but vague about my current circumstances. I spent precious dirhams at an internet cafe, securing a basic website that looked professional enough to inspire confidence. My first approach was to former colleagues I trusted, those who had left Meridian Partners before my discovery of Blake's fraud. To them, I sent carefully worded messages about my sabbatical and new independent consulting venture. I mentioned nothing about Blake or Morocco, presenting my situation as a chosen career pivot. Most responses were polite but non-committal. 2 former coworkers connected me with small clients needing remote assistance. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. I worked through nights on these projects, using the cafe's Wi-Fi after closing hours, determined to deliver exceptional results despite limited resources. As my virtual clientele expanded, I developed detailed contingency plans. Blake believed I was struggling somewhere in the States, a fact confirmed by Hamid's daughter, who monitored American social media with her perfect English. According to Aisha's reports, Blake had posted concerned messages about his missing wife, who had left suddenly due to stress. The performance made me sick, but it also meant he wasn't looking for me internationally. 8 weeks after my abandonment, a message arrived that would change everything. David Chin, an American financial services provider based in Dubai, had found my profile through a mutual connection. "I'm looking for someone with forensic accounting experience to consult on security protocols for our client services division," his email read. "Your background at Meridian is exactly what we need. Are you available for a video call to discuss a potential 3-month contract?" My heart raced as I read the message 3 times. This wasn't just another small client. This was a potential pathway to a new life. Dubai was far from both Morocco and America, a global financial hub where I could truly rebuild. But a video call would reveal my location, requiring explanations I wasn't prepared to give. I crafted a careful response, suggesting a preliminary phone consultation instead. "Currently traveling with limited internet access. I explained, but available to discuss your needs in detail. David agreed, and our call stretched from the planned 30 minutes to nearly 2 hours. He was impressed by my analysis of his company's vulnerabilities. Insights gleaned from my experience uncovering Blake's fraud scheme. By the end of the conversation, he wasn't offering a 3-month contract, but a permanent position. "We need someone with your eye for detail," he said. "And frankly, your perspective on how fraud occurs from the inside would be invaluable to our clients." The irony wasn't lost on me. Blake's betrayal had given me exactly the expertise this opportunity required. "I'll need 2 weeks," I told David. "And I'd prefer to handle my travel arrangements independently." "Of course," he agreed. "Send me your arrival details when you have them and we'll arrange accommodations." After the call, I assessed my finances with clinical precision. I had accumulated just enough for a one-way ticket to Dubai, basic accommodations for a month, and professional clothing. It would be tight but possible. The next 10 days became a methodical countdown. I created secure cloud storage for all my documentation of Blake's crimes and evidence of my abandonment. I transitioned my remote clients to completion or hiatus. I purchased my ticket using a prepaid card, selecting a route through Turkey to obscure my destination from any potential tracking. Saying goodbye to Hamid and Aisha was harder than I'd anticipated. They had become my Moroccan family, sheltering me when I had nothing. "You come back someday," Hamid insisted, pressing a small package into my hands. "When you are ready, not running." Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, Hassan's craftsmanship, with a note, "For writing your new story." On my final morning in Marrakesh, I looked at myself in the small mirror above Hamid's sink. The woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the one who had arrived 3 months earlier. My hair was shorter, my skin sun-darkened, my eyes harder. Blake wouldn't recognize me at first glance, and that was exactly the point. I left before dawn, taking only what fit in a single backpack. No reservations under my real name, no digital trail, no forwarding address. Hamid had promised to maintain the fiction that I had returned to America, in case anyone ever came looking. As the plane lifted from Moroccan soil, I watched the landscape recede through my window. I was leaving behind not just a place but a version of myself. The trusting wife, the obedient colleague, the woman who had been defined by her relationship to others. Ahead lay Dubai, an identity of my own creation. From the ashes of Brianna Carter, abandoned wife, Lynn Reynolds was emerging. A financial phoenix with specialized knowledge of exactly how men like Blake operated. And what they never saw coming. Dubai's skyline materialized through the airplane window like a mirage, gleaming towers rising improbably from desert sands. As we descended, I clutched my backpack containing everything I now owned. 2 changes of clothes, basic toiletries, my documentation, and exactly $267 in remaining funds. It wasn't much to start a new life, but it was more than I'd had that morning in Morocco 3 months ago. The blast of air conditioning in the terminal hit me like a physical force after the airplane's recycled warmth. I navigated immigration with my still valid passport, holding my breath until the officer stamped my entry without question. No red flags. No alerts. To the world, I was just another American arriving in the UAE for business. Outside the airport, the humidity wrapped around me like a wet blanket despite the late hour. I bypassed the line of luxury taxis for the more economical metro, following directions to the modest apartment hotel David had suggested in Al Barsha, far from the glittering center but clean and anonymous. The Pakistani desk clerk barely glanced at my passport as he processed my payment for 2 weeks in advance. My room was Spartan but functional. A bed, small kitchenette, bathroom and desk. I showered away 30 hours of travel, then stood wrapped in a thin towel, staring at my reflection. Brianna Carter looked back at me, exhausted but undefeated. Tomorrow she would begin to disappear. First light found me in a salon in a working-class neighborhood, where prices were a fraction of those in tourist areas. I showed the stylist a photo on my phone. "Very different," she commented, fingering my long brown waves. "You sure?" "Absolutely." 90 minutes later, I emerged with chin-length hair dyed a rich auburn, subtly altering my entire appearance. Next came a small boutique where I invested in 3 professional outfits. Conservative cuts with distinctly Middle Eastern influences. Nothing like the American styles I'd worn before. Small gold hoops replaced my signature pearl studs. Tinted moisturizer darkened my complexion slightly. Each change was minor, but collectively they created someone new. That afternoon, I arrived at Integrated Financial Solutions 30 minutes early for my meeting with David. The receptionist smiled. "Your name, please." "Lynn Reynolds." My middle name and maternal grandmother's maiden name flowed naturally from my lips after weeks of practice. David Chin emerged from the elevator moments later. A compact man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a quick, assessing gaze. Recognition flickered as he extended his hand. "Lynn. Welcome to Dubai." No mention of my transformed appearance, just a professional nod. "Let's get you settled." The office tour revealed a medium-sized operation with about 30 employees. David's company specialized in financial security consulting for regional businesses and wealthy families, helping clients protect assets from fraud, embezzlement, and digital threats. My new role would involve assessing vulnerabilities in their financial systems. "Your personal experience with fraud detection will be invaluable," David said in the privacy of his office. I told him only that I'd uncovered irregularities at my previous firm, nothing about Blake or my abandonment. "Our clients need someone who can think like the people who might target them." "I know exactly how those people operate," I replied, thinking of Blake's methodical decimation of my finances, and how to stay one step ahead. My first 2 weeks passed in a blur of client meetings, system analyses, and adapting to Dubai's rhythms. I lived frugally in my temporary housing, saving every dirham possible. At night, I researched Blake's firm, confirming they had no current presence in the UAE. I was safe for now. By my second month, I'd earned enough to move to a small but decent apartment in Business Bay. My client roster grew steadily as word spread about the American consultant with an uncanny ability to identify financial weak points. I developed a particular specialty in helping family offices protect their wealth from internal threats, a service that resonated deeply in Dubai's family-centered business culture. "You understand what others miss," Sheikh Abdullah, a prominent client, told me after I uncovered 3 separate vulnerabilities in his family's investment structure. "You see the danger not just in systems but in people." If only he knew how I'd learned that lesson. One Tuesday morning in my 4th month, David called me into his office, expression unusually serious. "We've been approached by an American investment firm looking to establish a presence here," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "They need comprehensive security protocols as part of their licensing requirements. Major opportunity for us." My blood froze as I opened the folder. Staring back at me was a familiar logo. Meridian Partners International, Blake's firm, rebranded for global expansion. "Something wrong?" David asked, noting my expression. I composed my features carefully. "Not at all. I'm familiar with their reputation." "Good. They're sending representatives next month for preliminary meetings. I want you to lead our team." That night I paced my apartment until dawn, weighing impossible options. I could refuse the assignment, risking David's suspicion. I could resign, abandoning the security I'd built. Or I could lean into the cosmic irony of the situation, positioning myself to learn exactly what Blake was planning while remaining safely hidden behind my new identity. The third option wasn't just pragmatic. It offered something I'd denied wanting: the chance to understand the full scope of what Blake had done. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing meticulously, researching Meridian's international structure, recent projects, and personnel. The firm's website showed expansions into Singapore and now potentially Dubai. Blake's professional headshot appeared under executive leadership, his smile as convincing as ever. Grant and Mason featured prominently too, the 3 architects of my abandonment, thriving and expanding. A deeper dive into financial news revealed their firm had recently secured backing from a major investment group, fueling their international growth. My analytical mind couldn't help but wonder, had my discovery of their fraud accelerated these plans? Was their expansion partly an attempt to escape regulatory scrutiny in the States? When David announced the initial meeting date, I arranged to participate remotely, claiming a conflict with another client. I couldn't risk face-to-face contact, not yet. Instead, I developed a strategy to remain involved while maintaining distance, providing written analyses, joining select meetings via video with technical difficulties affecting my camera, and positioning junior team members as my front-facing representatives. 2 days before Blake's team was scheduled to arrive, David dropped another bombshell. Change of plans, Lynn. They're sending their technology officer and legal counsel first. The principals, Carter, Wallace, and Sinclair, will come for the second phase next month. Relief washed over me. I had a reprieve, but also confirmation that Blake, Grant, and Mason were personally involved in the Dubai expansion. This wasn't just business development, it was their project. That evening, as I reviewed Meridian's financial statements with newly focused intensity, patterns emerged that mirrored what I'd discovered back in the States. Subtle inconsistencies in fee structures, vaguely defined service charges, the hallmarks of their previous scheme but adapted for international clients. They hadn't stopped. They'd simply scaled up. I closed my laptop, a cold certainty settling in my chest. My transformation from Brianna to Lynn hadn't been just about survival. It had been preparation. I now had the knowledge, position, and opportunity to understand their operation from the inside without exposing myself. For the first time since waking in that Moroccan motel, I felt not just resilience but purpose. Blake and his friends had come to Dubai looking to expand their empire. Instead, they would find Lynn Reynolds waiting, invisible, informed, and perfectly positioned to become their worst nightmare. For weeks, I meticulously gathered information about Meridian's Dubai expansion, analyzing their proposals from the shadows of my carefully constructed identity. Their advance team had no idea that the security consultant reviewing their materials was the same woman they had abandoned in Morocco. I maintained my distance through strategic scheduling and technical difficulties during video calls, all while compiling a comprehensive understanding of their operation. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was meeting with an Emirati client at Atmosphere, the restaurant near the top of Burj Khalifa. The meeting had run long, extending into dinner as we finalized security protocols for his family office. As we signed the paperwork, movement by the entrance caught my eye. My breath stopped. Grant and Gabrielle stood with the hostess, dressed for an evening out. Of course, this would be on the tourist highlight list for visitors. I hadn't anticipated them arriving before Blake and Mason's scheduled trip next week. I turned my face slightly away, grateful for my transformed appearance. My client, noticing my sudden discomfort, misinterpreted it. "Does something disturb you, Ms. Reynolds?" "Not at all," I replied, focusing on our documents. "Just remembered another appointment." We wrapped up quickly and I gathered my materials, planning my escape route. But as I stood to leave, Gabrielle's gaze swept across the restaurant and landed directly on me. For one electric moment our eyes locked. Confusion flickered across her face, the struggle to place someone familiar in an unexpected context. I broke the connection first, nodding politely to my client before walking unhurriedly toward the exit opposite from where they stood. In my peripheral vision I saw Gabrielle nudge Grant, pointing discreetly in my direction. Grant squinted, then shook his head, unconvinced. They were seated before I reached the elevator. Back in my apartment, adrenaline coursed through me. Had she recognized me? The uncertainty was agonizing, but I forced myself to think logically. My appearance was significantly different. The chance encounter had been brief. And who would expect to see Blake Carter's abandoned wife thriving in Dubai, consulting with elite clients? 2 days later I had my answer. An innocuous LinkedIn notification appeared on my phone. "Gabrielle Wallace viewed your profile." My carefully curated Lynn Reynolds profile with its selective employment history and professional headshot showing only my changed appearance and new hairstyle. Hours later my old phone, maintained but in use since Morocco, vibrated for the first time in months. Blake's name appeared on the screen. Then again. And again. Within 24 hours missed calls accumulated from Blake, Grant, Mason, and even Ellie. Voicemails filled my inbox, none of which I played. They knew. Through my firm's security monitoring of Meridian's communication channels, ostensibly to establish proper protocols, I watched their internal messages spike with urgency. Meeting schedules changed. Travel plans accelerated. Blake and Mason were now arriving in 3 days instead of next week. Rather than panic, I felt an odd sense of calm. This confrontation had been inevitable from the moment I chose Dubai instead of returning to the States. Now I would dictate its terms. First, I secured my position. I met with David, sharing select details about my history with Meridian partners. I previously worked with them in the States, I explained. We had significant professional disagreements about their compliance practices. I left when I discovered irregularities I couldn't ethically support. David's eyes narrowed. Is this why you've maintained distance from their team? Yes. I didn't want personal history to interfere with our firm's opportunity. But given their principals are arriving soon, you should know. Appreciate the transparency, David said. Would you prefer to withdraw from the project? Actually, I replied, I'd like to oversee it entirely. I know exactly what to look for in their operations. With David's approval secured, I moved to phase 2. I compiled a detailed dossier on Meridian's dubious practices, both from my original discovery in the States and the patterns continuing in their international expansion. I sent this anonymously to 3 entities: the SEC in America, the Financial Regulatory Authority in Dubai, and most devastatingly, to the family office of Sheikh Abdullah, who had been considering a significant investment in Meridian's Dubai launch. The timing was precise. Questions would begin emerging just as Blake and Mason arrived, catching them off guard in unfamiliar territory. The day of their arrival, my old phone buzzed continuously. Blake's messages grew increasingly desperate. Brianna, we need to talk. Please call me back. It's important. I know you're in Dubai. We need to meet. This is all a misunderstanding. I maintained radio silence, watching from afar as their carefully constructed plans began unraveling. Sheikh Abdullah's office canceled their meeting, citing troubling information about their practices. Regulatory officials requested additional documentation about their fee structures. Their local banking partner suddenly needed clarification on certain transfer protocols. On their 3rd day in Dubai, I was having coffee at the address downtown when I spotted them in the lobby. Blake and Mason, looking harried and confused, trailed by their legal counsel. I didn't hide. When Blake's gaze eventually found me across the atrium, I simply raised my cup in a small salute, maintaining eye contact until he went pale with recognition. He changed direction immediately, heading toward me with Mason scrambling to follow. I remained seated, perfectly composed as they approached. Brianna. Blake's voice was a mixture of shock and forced warmth. My God, we've been so worried. My name is Lynn Reynolds, I replied coolly. I believe you have me confused with someone else. Stop this, he hissed, dropping the pretense. We need to talk privately. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I have a precise understanding of what I'm doing, I replied, gathering my belongings. And what you've been doing. So do the relevant authorities. Mason grabbed Blake's arm as hotel security glanced our way. Not here, he muttered. I stood, smoothing my dress. Gentlemen, I have a meeting. I suggest you focus on answering the questions coming your way rather than creating a scene. Blake's face contorted with something between rage and fear. This isn't over. It was over the moment you left me in Morocco, I replied softly. You just didn't know it yet. The calls intensified after that encounter. 121 in total over the following days. I listened to none of them, watching instead as Meridian's Dubai aspirations collapsed. Their regulatory approval stalled indefinitely. Potential investors withdrew. Their advance team departed hastily, leaving Blake and Mason to face mounting questions about their operations both in Dubai and at home. 1 week after our encounter, David called me into his office, his expression serious but eyes twinkling. Sheikh Abdullah was impressed with how you identified the issues with Meridian, he said. So impressed that he's recommended us to 3 other family offices. And he suggested we consider expanding our leadership team. He slid a partnership agreement across his desk. You've built something remarkable here, Lynn. We'd like you to make it official. That evening, as Dubai's skyline glittered against the darkening sky, I finally turned on my old phone. The notification showed 121 missed calls and 37 voicemails from Blake and the others. I listened to just one, the most recent. Brianna, please. Blake's voice had lost all its confident smoothness. They're opening an investigation. Our clients are asking questions. I don't know what you told them, but we can fix this. We can work something out. Just call me back. Please. I deleted his message, then methodically erased each of the other 36 voicemails without listening. Finally, I deleted all 121 missed calls from my call log, each tap of my finger dismantling another thread connecting me to my past. The woman they had abandoned in Morocco no longer existed. In her place stood Lynn Reynolds, financial security expert and newly minted partner at one of Dubai's rising consulting firms. I hadn't just survived their betrayal. I had transformed it into the foundation of something stronger than they could ever comprehend. Blake and his friends had orchestrated what they thought was my ending. Instead, they had merely set the stage for my most powerful beginning. Justice, it turned out, tasted sweetest when served cold from a distance, by a woman they no longer recognized.